The official topic for today is using technology to break away from traditional assessments. That's really broad, as you can guess, so I'm going to narrow it down in a few minutes. The main idea behind that topic was not to change the classroom structure all through one webinar, but just to give people a few simple ideas to begin the process of using technology. You still have to give tests and quizzes and homework, and hopefully shift toward more of a blended environment as new technology enters the classroom. All those things will continue on, but today's topic is just a way to start to make some small changes in how we assess students, everything from formal tests down to more informal, ongoing sorts of assessment in the classroom, little pop quizzes, warm-ups, things like that. So it's a very broad topic. As I said, I will be narrowing it down in a few minutes, but that's the basic idea behind it, is to start to make some inroads, and if you're not already there, to bring your classroom into the 21st century. Again, this is part of a three-part webinar series. When I signed up to do this for EdWeb, three ideas kind of popped in my head. I knew it was too much to do all at once, so I broke it down into kind of a series. Last time the focus was on question writing. Very simply put, just how to take some existing questions and try to make them higher order for the demands of Common Core, particularly for mathematics. And that webinar has been posted, so if you missed that and you like what you hear today, you might want to go to the Assessment for Learning community, download it and watch it, and you can catch up with where we are right now. As I said, today's topic is not going to be earth-shattering, but I hope it gives you some really good ideas for using technology to begin to shift into a modern digital classroom, particularly as it relates to assessment. So it's a very, very small piece of the puzzle. The next one will be much broader, which will be taking the steps of the first two webinars and talking about really innovative ways now of restructuring classrooms, but that's getting a little bit ahead of ourselves today. I like to start out trainings or presentations with a few ideas of what I hope you leave with to kind of model what we all preach when we do instruction. I need to clarify the very first one. As you'll see in a few minutes, I'm neither pro or anti multiple choice. I think all kinds of questions have a place in the classroom. And sometimes when you give a statement like that doesn't rely on multiple choice, it can sound almost negative. With technology, you often need multiple choice. That's just the reality of it. It's because of the limitations with clickers or phones, or recognition of handwriting, character recognition, making sense of students' entries. Because of all that, we're still actually at a point where multiple choice is still pretty important for being able to get quick responses from students. So when I say it doesn't rely on multiple choice, I actually mean that a little bit more generally. It's a way to use that limitation and through a few clever little hacks to get the most out of it. The same kind of statement can be made about the second principle listed there, to go paperless. Change comes slowly, and some of what you'll see in this webinar today is actually a little bit of a hybrid between going fully electronic delivery and paper. And then the last two things, as I actually put my topics on the computer, I realized just the first two took up a lot of time, so I won't be able to cover much of the last two, but they're definitely goals for this webinar, and they will feed into the third in the series about restructuring classrooms. So those last two bullet points I'll touch on a little bit today, but as it turns out, for lack of time, it'll mostly be picked up in my next webinar. This is kind of an important slide because some people turn down their volume, and when your webinar, I find out, gets posted on the internet, people may walk away for a few minutes, come back with a cup of coffee, and so this is kind of a disclaimer slide. This is telling visually what's not going to be covered, and I felt that was kind of important because if somebody only caught a part of the webinar, gee, I might be tarred and feathered and said, oh, he's a traditionalist, he just likes the old school model, he's not for modern forms of assessment and learning, And that's decidedly not true. But I thought I better put up this disclaimer just to make sure that if you happen to walk away at the wrong moment, get a cup of coffee, you won't miss what my personal philosophy is, which is all those things are important. It's just more than we can cover right now. So you can share this slide with anybody who thinks the webinar is different than it really is. All right, so narrowing all this down, I hope you get my little metaphor of the drop in the bucket. Formative assessment, technology in the classroom, blended learning, flipped classrooms. These are enormously broad topics, and they can hardly be done justice in a 60-minute webinar. So I'm going to squish it all into this little funnel, metaphorically speaking, and just try to touch on one very, very small aspect. Now, the first point is probably non-controversial, uses classroom technology. The second point is another one of those little points that can get you tarred and feathered if people don't understand what you're talking about. I'm no proponent of the old professorial model, but for what I'm talking about today in this webinar, in order to narrow it down, I'm going to be focusing on that kind of classroom activity or assessment that is mostly led by the teacher, which will allow me to rule out some things in the interest of time savings. Now, led by the teacher can be interpreted more as sort of a coaching model, a mentoring model. It doesn't mean just necessarily handing out papers, sitting at your desk, waiting until the test is over and collecting them. That isn't necessarily what it means. But again, in the interest of narrowing things down, I thought that was a pretty important point to make, that we're not talking about students sitting in a lab where the computer is guiding them. We're talking about them in a slightly more traditional classroom where the student is the guide. And then the last point also helps narrow things down. There's lots of ways of doing assessment in the classroom. Many different ways that if I were doing a daily webinar, maybe I can begin to cover them all. We're going to talk today and look at today the kind that's meant to give the teacher very quick feedback using technology. And again, that's partly in the interest of time. And that would mean ruling out things like projects, work that the students maybe upload to Google Drive, or put into a school, a community website, email to the teacher, get some feedback the next day. It also rules out a little bit of a delay even within the classroom. Instead, we're going to focus on the kind of technology-based assessment, very general use of the term assessment, where the teacher can grab results very quickly and act on them even within the same class period. So that's kind of what it's meant by immediate feedback. So here's a nice visual of what all this really does mean when you narrow it down. And the first thing that will strike you is we are talking about a lot of gadgetry. There's no question about that. And the amount of gadgetry is increasing very quickly in classrooms, especially as students started to bring their own devices. You can see a couple of old school like contraptions here, or gadgets. There's a webcam, a type of, a document cam in the middle of the screen. There's even some bubble sheets because that's part of a hybrid model using technology. There's a bubble scanner off to the left. And then even to treat low tech as a part of this puzzle. You can see a picture in the middle, which is meant to illustrate the point that you don't have to go 100% in the electronic direction. Those little handheld whiteboards, they're a type of technology too, and they can give the teacher very quick, immediate feedback. So I just put it in there to kind of illustrate that in the end, we're really talking about a spectrum all the way from something kind of low tech, writing on paper, raising your hand, all the way up to very modern technologies using wireless devices, smartphones, etc. So that's kind of a visual then to kind of get you started. Now, one other point I'm going to make about what was left out, you'll see that there's no computers here in the sense of it being a computer lab. There's a couple laptops shown. There's definitely tablets and phones that can act like computers. But a laboratory, an old traditional computer lab, is not shown here because I felt it was fairly important to take that out of the equation right now, in part because I didn't think it was teacher-led enough. It's more of a computer-based learning, and it's not the kind of thing where a teacher might throw a little pop quiz at the students, and the reason for that is because they have to open their notebooks, which I guess would be okay if they all have notebooks, or a teacher has to march them down to the computer lab, and I didn't really think it filled this model of what I'm calling real-time formative assessment. The other thing that's left out is the software layer, you'll see from this picture. And the reason is a lot of different software layers slip into this. So I thought the picture of the hardware itself was probably a little bit more valuable. We're going to move right now into the sort of the software layer. Well, this may go without saying if you're a classroom teacher and you are joining this webinar today. The gadgetry is all very colorful and bright, and the people who sell it will tell you it's very easy to use and you get going right away. But everybody who has been in a classroom, including myself, knows it is not as easy as it looks. I mean, just putting aside even the funding issue, which is not talked about here at all, classroom management, getting a fast internet connection, that's just getting started. And then when it's actually time to implement some of this stuff, you realize that there are hurdles you got to get over. The paper kind of hybrid is one of them. There's a lot of quick formative assessment that makes use of technology that still starts out on paper. And that might be because the teacher has to present some pictures, something for the students to draw, a little task that's not very effectively graded with technology. It might be creating a table. It might be doing a little graph. It might be writing a small essay where you want to see the student go through the process of doing it and not just see the submission. And this raises an interesting trade-off with a lot of this technology, is that when you are using the technology to do real-time assessment, you are pretty much seeing the student submission. You're not seeing their thinking process so much. And one reason to use kind of a hybrid approach that still uses some paper is so you can see what they're scratching out, you can see their notes, if it's a math course you can see their scratch work, and maybe even help that way learn the kinds of mistakes they're making. So I think paper remains a pretty important part of the real-time form assessment process, but it's expensive. The reproduction to give kids handouts is costly. The main issues I'm going to focus on today is the main two is really the second and third bullet point there. And since I'm going to come back to them, I won't spend a lot of time on them now. But let me just kind of give you a little foreshadowing. One of the remaining problems with real-time formative assessment, the name that I'm giving it, is that the machine, the device, the tablet, the phone, not only has to accept the answer, but then it has to deliver it to some kind of scoring and reporting software that can interpret the answer. And artificial intelligence has still not reached a point where most of this real-time formative assessment equipment can do much more than multiple choice, maybe true-false, maybe matching columns. It might be able to handle some numeric and free response answers. But this can be a real issue if a teacher's trying to get feedback from students, is how to get the answers and then how to get software that can interpret them. So I'm going to be spending a fair bit of time in the remaining part of this webinar on that very topic. The formatting issue I'm going to come to toward the very end because it actually ties in with the software that our company makes. And if you'll bear with me, I'm going to give a little not quite a commercial, but a little preview of what we do and how we're trying to address some of these problems. The bulleted point about classroom technology may not match the capabilities of student devices. That's not really a networking or connectivity statement. It's really that the student devices are advancing so quickly that it can introduce a couple of interesting problems. One is boredom. You know, what teachers are trying to keep up with during the classroom, maybe it's interesting on day 1 or 2. You know, your students might do a little game with the scoring activity, rocket ships or race cars, or I'm not sure if Angry Birds has come out with a classroom version for quizzes yet. But the point is that students lose interest pretty quickly, and they're moving so fast now with the software that they use for communicating with their friends and looking at videos and putting things up on the internet, photos or what have you, that the classroom technology we introduce, it can really start to look pretty primitive pretty quickly. And I think that's a real issue when you're trying to use a technology, because the students can be yawning and it can start to look like really ancient stuff pretty quickly, and so the novelty of it wears off. So that's just something to keep in mind. We gotta stay on top of them. Here's a little kind of summary of what this is all about that narrows things down even a little bit further. I tried to put into a simple matrix form the various, and I tried to get down to 2 dimensions, the various things that you need to pull this off. The 2 dimensions are the delivery and scoring. On the left, you can see I narrowed things down to just 3 kinds of delivery. You can do traditional paper, you can put it on a screen, and you'll see my little footnote there. We're talking about 2 different kinds of screens here. We're talking about a projector screen, a kind of traditional movie screen. It could be an interactive whiteboard, or we're talking about a small screen, possibly very small, a phone, and not even a tablet or laptop. So that's definitely one of the quote-unquote modalities for delivering questions. And of course, it can change your approach very much if you're talking about a big screen or a little screen. And then, of course, a device could be something like clickers across the top. I may have jumped the gun there a little bit, but that's probably where the phone or the tablet would fit in as a delivery. I did jump the gun. I mixed the 2. Sorry about that. Across the top is the scoring modalities, and they kind of go from the slightly older ones to the newer ones, which are the devices again. Now, I put the little snail icon there for paper. I should explain that. A scanner is not a bad idea for paper if you don't have a fully modern digital classroom. There's some really great new little quick scanning mechanisms using document scanners, plus very quick little printer bubble sheet-like scanners. And if you've got a slightly lower tech classroom, it's really not a bad way to do it. They'll probably survive for some years still. And they do work reasonably well with paper. So if you feel that paper is the way to deliver your assessment, you might want to take advantage of some of these neat little quick scoring tools. Now, the scanners, unfortunately, don't do much more than multiple choice. So some of the options I'm going to show in a few minutes about how to go beyond multiple choice won't really apply very well to scanners. But if you are doing some multiple choice, it could be a useful avenue. Now, the clicker metaphor, maybe I'm going to get some grief for. Clickers I don't think are completely out, but with paper probably. And the reason is clickers always suffered, they've generally, the companies that put out clickers generally had support for external tests, paper-based tests, but they generally had one deficiency, as they don't go back and forth very easily. Some of them might have a little bit better navigation now, but most of them are intended to go through the test in a linear fashion, particularly the ones that show results up on the screen, how many questions a student has answered. And they're not particularly friendly devices for jumping around and answering questions out of sequence. So that plus their age, I thought probably warranted the dinosaur metaphor. But they're still workable for other things, which I'll mention in a second. The device column for paper is very interesting because it addresses the 2 issues that I just mentioned before. For a scanner, it gives a student even faster feedback. It works with questions that are not just multiple choice, and it avoids the issue that I mentioned with clickers, where students can jump around with virtually any device-based scoring now. They can jump from question to question, go back, re-answer with almost all software. And then we get to the happier things. Clickers with screens, well, they were made to go together. In fact, they do. The companies that make the interactive whiteboards typically make their own clickers for that exact reason. Devices and screens, they're really shaking and moving. They're even better because when you add a little bit more technology to your handheld, you can speak to what's going on the screen a lot better. And so things really do start happening. And then finally, nirvana, is when the delivery of the question is on the same device that's also scoring it or taking the student submission. And that's the little rainbow down to the bottom right. Okay, so let's get down to business. This is the topic I told you I would come back to, which really will start to give some shape to what I'm going to talk about on subsequent slides, because so far I've talked about something very abstract, and probably most of the people who tuned in for this webinar are probably very familiar with everything I mentioned so far. But now I think I can make, having laid the groundwork, I think I can make some quick progress into some useful hints. The TIE is a little acronym that everybody should start to get to know, Technology Enhanced Items. In a lot of ways, they're going to be the future of education. I don't know if we're there yet, but they really take full advantage of this hardware that's coming into the schools, because they let students interact with the question. So it's not just, here's a question, submit your answer. The question itself becomes the form of interaction. And these little technology enhanced items are popping up everywhere. My own personal opinion is I think they still have a ways to go. Some of them are really clever. Some of them are not much more than an on-screen version of what could be done on paper, and I'm not sure they contribute a lot. But like any new technology, it takes time. But keep your eye out. The Common Core testing for mathematics is going to make a big use of these. Smarter Balance and Park are working on them. You can go to their websites and you can actually see what I'm talking about. The questions don't just pose something to the student, but they actually give the student a way to interact with the question itself, maybe dragging and dropping, filling in blanks, ordering things, drawing a graph, maybe using some simple little geometry tools to sketch things out. And some of them are very interesting, very clever, how people came up with these ideas. But as far as doing in-class formative assessment, the truth of the matter is there's just simply not enough of them. That's one issue. They're expensive to do, and that inherently limits them. And they're not broad and deep enough yet to use for widespread ongoing assessment in the classroom. There might be enough of them now on different websites, little JavaScript widgets and things that a good number of questions can be asked, but I think most teachers will still find that just aren't enough, and they're not enough of them written yet for testing everything teachers might want to test. So the 6 bullets that follow kind of illustrate then what we have left once you take those out. The last 2, I didn't even give examples of them, because I don't think we're far enough along yet. There are increasingly some programs that are doing character recognition. They are trying to interpret little sketches that students draw. But artificial intelligence has been promising a lot of this stuff for 20, 25 years, as long as I can remember. And hopefully it won't be that much longer. But for somebody who's following the field pretty closely, I don't think we're quite there yet. Hopefully soon. So the first 4 bulleted points are the ones that we're much closer to. And number 4, about the math parsing, probably not yet, but I would think within a year or 2, most software that can handle student input will have some kind of math parsing where students can enter fractions, radicals, special symbols, and then all of a sudden the math possibilities will really expand. And if that comes in also at the time when students can do sketching, then I think we're really into an exciting change in how student understanding is assessed. Well, that narrows it down then, having sort of dismissed the last 3 slightly. What we really have, the reality in the classroom, is that we all have the first one with almost any software. Some newer software can do the second one, and the third one as well. But that doesn't leave a lot of options for getting quick results from students. They can hit the little buttons on the clicker, they can type some stuff in with their little keypad on a device, a tablet or a phone, and with any luck the scoring software will be able to recognize what it is. We face this problem with our own company, trying to receive student answers and make sense of what the student is really trying to say as an answer. And by the way, I know there's a lot of companies working on these things. I was kind of, my eye caught a couple little chat messages that people put in with some ideas. As I said earlier, I don't want to sound dismissive of any of this stuff, I'm just trying to be a bit of a realist. There's a lot of companies working on these issues, and many of them doing excellent work. My point is really just there's probably not quite enough yet to do much more than experimentation with in the classroom. And just to give you kind of an idea of that, I looked up some of the major companies that are doing scoring, and you probably recognize the names, companies like Schoology, Infused Learning, Socrative, 10 Marks, Mastery Connect. 10 Marks is doing a lot of technology-enhanced items. They're a little bit more of an online student learning program, but the other ones that I rattled off are pretty much limited to the first few bulleted points up there. All right, very quickly, and then I want to give you some real-life examples. One of the important things to understand about assessment is it's not all the second bulleted point, which is objective answers. You may want to let students just use their devices in an anonymous way to do things like voting or agree or disagree about a statement in class. Self-assessment is becoming very popular with things like exit slips. Just students basically giving the teacher some feedback. I need some more help here. And that's a very good kind of assessment. It won't be anything that I cover in this webinar, but I just want to put this slide up so everybody realizes that this topic that I'm talking about expands quite a bit if you're interested in these other areas. All right, well, now getting to the meat. I'm kind of a question fanatic. I used to be a high school math teacher, and I actually like interesting questions as sort of a consumer of them and a frequent author of them. So I found these in a book off of a shelf. It's probably a 20-year-old book, and I thought I would throw them up to kind of emphasize the point. It's the header of this slide. Is in the end, what you ask is what really matters, in my opinion. Even more than the collecting of the data, even more than what you do with the data. If you ask really good questions, students will learn. Students will be excited about learning. You'll figure out what they know and don't know. So I'm a real believer that the questions are central to all this. And for that reason, you shouldn't necessarily rule out multiple choice. Some multiple choice is kind of interesting. And you shouldn't necessarily say just because it's not multiple choice, it's better. The truth is it comes down to the quality of the question, not the format of it. Now these questions, interestingly, are from an examination for air traffic controllers. And the directions are not mine. They came right out of the book, simplified a little bit. You might want to try some of them. I can't spend a lot of time in this slide, but it kind of illustrates the point that these are multiple choice. They are selected response. There's a term I'll talk about in a few minutes. They're not free response, although it could be kind of turned into that type of question if you wanted. But they're kind of fun to do, and the idea is pretty simple. There's two boxes. The box on the top left of each of the questions gives three examples of something that follow a pattern. The box on the right has two examples that don't follow that pattern but are similar in some ways, and you're supposed to figure out what's the third one that goes in that box that doesn't fit the pattern on the left. And maybe some of you figured this out already. I think these are kind of fun. I think students would enjoy them, and there's got to be uses for them even outside of a math classroom, which is where I first saw some relevance to them in terms of algebra and pattern recognition. Remember, these were given for an air traffic control exam, so they're really about just recognizing patterns, well, in this case, probably on a radar screen and on instrumentation. Well, maybe people want to throw into the chat some of the answers, but remember, this slideshow is going to be posted, so if you like these, you can go back and show them to your students. And if you want more, I think I can probably photocopy the pages from that book and put them up on the website. Well, if you are an elementary math teacher, you probably know there's a variation of this question that I just showed. These are very common on state assessments. I can't remember offhand if Common Core has this exact topic. I'm more familiar with secondary topics in Common Core. But if you're an elementary math teacher, you've probably seen questions like this. It's usually under a standard about examples and counterexamples. And I just posed a little query here. Is there a way to present a question like this that is not multiple choice? There probably is. It's a task-oriented question. Once you give students maybe 4 or 5 or 10 little examples like this, maybe you could just have them do their own. Maybe you could take away the selected responses and just say, draw a picture of another mop. Draw a picture of one that's not a mop. So I guess I'm answering my own question. It doesn't really have to be multiple choice, but again, if you want to do assessment in the classroom that's real time, you'd want to use multiple choice, and I think there's nothing wrong with this question. I think it's a good thinking question. Here's one more slide to just kind of drive the point home. Multiple choice doesn't have to be low level. There's often giveaways that show that a question is involves a little higher order thinking skills. Giveaways like why, and sometimes you see the word most, or in the top right question there, the word indicates. If you spot these keywords, with most people that do training on higher order thinking skills make the same point, that you can often judge a question by the vocabulary. It's not always true, but they're pretty good hints. So these are all examples of multiple choice that you know, are definitely penetrating and trying to get at student understanding. Here's a point that may be completely obvious, but it ties in very closely with real-time formative assessment. If your scoring software can handle free response, then often you just simply have to either A, erase the free response answers and give the question to the students, or if you're lucky enough to have software, hint, like ours, that can do it automatically, well, then you've got free response variants. And these questions actually introduce another point, which is that free response, even if your software can handle free response and scoring, you still might have to be a little bit more selective in what you use. The one on the bottom right is probably an obvious candidate. In fact, it's probably a better free response question because it's asking about estimation than to simply give the years. The one on the top right is a little miniature computer exercise, kind of dated because it's about Fortran. I pulled it out of a book because it was quick to present here. But those questions would almost certainly be scorable by just about any intelligent scoring software. Most vendors that do scoring software for devices can score short answers like that. Now, they might interpret the first 4 as numbers and then maybe have a little bit more trouble with the asterisks, trying to distinguish between a number and a text string. But I think most software could probably handle that. Then you get to the ones on the left. Again, if the software is pretty intelligent, the plus and minus in front of numbers shouldn't throw it off. It should still be able to recognize it as a numeric quantity and be able to say if the student got the right answer. The bottom left one starts to get a little bit trickier because there's spelling errors that could occur. The middle answer is C, which is not the right answer, fortunately, but that introduces 3 words, which if you've got some very intelligent software might be able to figure out if they're in the wrong order or if they have extra spaces. But you can see why the one on the bottom left starts to get a little bit trickier as far as automated scoring goes. All right. Now, because a lot of software can't handle anything than multiple choice, I thought what I would do is present a series of slides that, in my field, in computer science, if you will, you could almost phrase as hacks. They're sort of clever workarounds that lit a selected response question, which you see now I've shifted from the term multiple choice, only because multiple choice is really a form of selected response. But I purposely chose selected response here because it will appear to be multiple choice, what we're about to see, but a little bit more clever so that you're sort of faking your scoring software to accept the answers in a way that's almost free response if they can't quite handle them. And so I'm going to go through each of these types, and I'll pass through this slide kind of quickly. If you're interested, you can call it the slideshow again and see the categories that I assigned. So we don't need to spend a lot of time on this. You've seen questions like this. Multiple choice can get a little bit higher level and even start to simulate a type of question that's going to be on Common Core math, which is where there's more than one correct answer. Sometimes these are presented as technology based items, enabled items. I'm not quite sure why. Oftentimes they are a question stem followed by 4 or 5 choices. And the technology enabling is nothing more than checking the little box next to the choices of the ones that are correct. I mean, sure, it's done with technology, but it's not all that fundamentally different than answering a question like one of these. But if you don't have the luxury of those technology-enhanced items to practice with your kids, you can simulate it reasonably well through multiple choice by giving lists like this or answers that ask kids to choose from a list. Here's just a few more examples I'm going to put up quickly just to show that it's not all about mathematics. The one on the top left is actually a social studies question, elementary level, about, I think it's about different kinds of economic activities. The one on the right is a science question, and the one on the middle I put front and center because it's a really interesting question type that I'm going to show you more of in just a couple of minutes. For a math question like that, there's 4 possibilities. One is bigger than the other, 2 versions of that, they're the same, or you're not given enough information to tell. I'm going to show you a neat variation of that in a few minutes, which is another nice alternative to multiple choice. Here's a couple of quick examples of this concept of ordering things. These would all make great technology-enhanced items because you could simply drag and drop and put things in order. And what you're really looking at is a simulation through multiple choice. The top left one is kind of clever because it uses little icons instead of the math. But otherwise, it's pretty much dragging and dropping. You could put these in order if you have the technology capability, or you could just simulate it through these multiple choice answers. A few more examples of that. The one on the left is actually a sort of a logic problem where the answers have to be put in order. And one of the little hacks or hints, if you have scoring software but it can't really handle anything but multiple choice or just simple answers like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is you could get rid of the multiple choice on the cat question there and simply change the question to be what's the number of the first cat? And so the students then are just entering a single number, and you've suddenly gotten away from multiple choice as long as you have devices that can handle that. The top right one, I give a little hint. It's not a great hint, but if your devices can't handle something like plus, minus, times, or divide, you can always just assign a letter to it and just tell students, you know, if plus is the answer, answer A, minus B, and so on. The one on the bottom right is an old trick. You see it all the time in math classes, partly to make questions more readable. Is that old-time math teachers like myself will simply name the items or the students in the problem with alphabetical letters, letters in alphabetical order, that is. And then if you're asking a a fairly straight question, in this case, who is the class president, the students can just enter A, B, C, D, or E right onto their device just by virtue of the naming. Okay, this question I only threw up, well, for 2 reasons. One, to get in a little bit more language arts, and to kind of make a general point that most of you participating in this, this webinar probably already realize. Not every question is so good on either a big screen or little screen. It obviously depends on the, the capabilities of the device and the length of the question and the clarity of it. In this particular case, it kind of illustrates that long paragraphs, if this were on a tablet and kids could scroll and treat it a little bit like an e-reader, that would be just fine, but it's probably not so good projected in front of the class. Here's a couple little hints for asking similar kinds of questions in a way that makes them scoreable, but a little bit easier to kind of chew on if you were looking at a screen in front of the class. I think the one on the right is not so effective there. But the one on the right does have the advantage of being able to, for students to be able to submit a single answer, numeric if necessary, or a letter, where they just pick the order in the box. And I think it's a slight improvement over those paragraphs you just saw, because it's a little bit easier to follow. The one on the left has a very interesting hack, and I'll show you a couple more examples, and you can take it with you. It's a little bit of a trick. If you put any sequential events in a list, then the students can enter the answer as a number. So if you just took out the commas, you use your imagination here a little bit, you will get unique answers. In fact, you could ask the students a question of how many different, for math class, how many different unique answers are there? How many different orders could you put those things in? But for example, instead of answering A, You could make this a free response problem if your device can handle it. You could just say the correct answer is 45213. That's the number that represents the sequence, and students could enter that as a numeric answer, and most software can handle it. A few more quick examples, and I'm going to move on past these, just showing the same principle applies in social studies. There's a lot of event ordering in social studies. And you can see, I think the question here on the bottom right is superior to the way it's done on the top left. It also could take advantage of that little hack that I mentioned. It's a little bit easier for students to distill the information presented that way. A few more examples from science. The ones on the bottom also could be free response. They're not numeric, but students could enter a text string of like DBCA as the answer without the hyphens or without the commas. And most scoring software can handle that, and you've just gotten away from a multiple choice question. Steps of a math proof or scientific experiment follow the same kind of idea. I'm going to go quickly through that in the interest of time. And then here's the one I told you I would come back to. If you remember that problem of the ant in the box, I said that's a very interesting mathematical problem because there's 4 distinct answers. One is bigger than the other, or reverse. They're equal, or you don't know which is bigger. Now this is a classic problem off the SAT. If you're in my age bracket, you might remember when this was on the SAT. The College Board got rid of these now about 10 years ago. But that doesn't mean you can't use them in a classroom environment. They can be really interesting and great for discussion because of that D answer. You know, maybe there isn't enough information to decide. And our company actually publishes 1,000 of these totally for free on our website, problematic.com, which I'll mention again in just a few minutes. So please help yourself to them. If you're a math teacher, maybe even a science teacher, you might find some great use of some of these. They're very good for discussion. The answers can be put into devices, so they work with real-time form of assessment. And I think they're interesting. I think kids in general will like to do these in sort of a lower pressure, maybe daily warm-up, group work, you know, a quick question-answer kind of environment. Work great with devices because there's just 4 answers. I'll kind of wrap it up with some obvious ones. Here are some words that are not multiple choice in the traditional sense. I mean, they're definitely selected response. But if you're an ELA teacher, and you'll notice some of these are also pulled in from old SAT tests, I understand that analogies are going away. Maybe they did already. But spelling, antonyms, synonyms, analogies, these are all good ways to use devices and to do some real-time form assessment that doesn't look like kind of low-level multiple choice. Column match, some new device software can handle this. If not, you can use a little hack or another trick, very similar to the one I mentioned before. This doesn't have to be one question. This column match example could actually be questions 1 through 6, and the answers to questions 1 through 6 are the 6 letters A through F. So you could just tell your students for question number 1, put in the right letter, hit submit. For question number 2, put in the right letter, hit submit. Or they can enter them all as a sequence, so it's a little text string similar to the sequencing I gave before. So this is a way to simulate a technology type of item with more, forgive me for using this word, but you know, for more primitive classroom technology, you can really simulate a fairly modern kind of technology-enhanced item using the capabilities that are already on your clicker or device if you're just sort of clever in how the students submit the answers. And then finally, your classic true or false types of questions. Just for fun, I decided to pull these from some discipline other than the core subjects, math, science, social studies, and reading. So I pulled 3 questions from a baseball certification exam and 3 from a professional chef exam, and I put in a little extra credit question down there to the right. You all know how to do these types of questions. You may not know the answers, but true, false, and yes, no are classics. Okay, so I sort of covered what I wanted to in the way of getting beyond multiple choice and getting results quickly from students in a classroom setting. I do want to show you a little bit about how we're trying to address this problem. I don't know if some of you may be familiar with the radio show Click and Clack, the auto repair specialists on PBS, or Saturday morning is when I hear them. I love the show, and they always announce something called the Shameless Commerce Division. So I'm going to steal that term from them and give you a very quick run through of what our company does, just in case it's useful to you. And I'll highlight this little free bulleted point here because you could get an awful lot of use out of this website and pay nothing. We hope you'll find enough that's valuable in it that you might want to become a subscriber, but check it out definitely for the free part of the website to start. There's 90,000 questions, which have actually gone up. I think it's 95,000. We just didn't change the number yet. In a couple of weeks, it's going to jump up to about 110,000. These are totally free. We got permission from different states and organizations to publish them. And what we did is we took them out of all the PDF files that are on these states' websites, and we got permission to put them in a database. So very quickly, just to kind of show you how it works, you just simply sign up, and you can go into 27 different states, pull in questions from former assessments, or not just even assessments. Some of them are simply curriculum samples. Many of them are tasks, so they're not even necessarily multiple choice or traditional kinds of assessment questions. Connecticut has published a lot of tasks. I can single them out. Also, you'll notice there's national and international assessments. There's a lot of tasks in NAEP and TIMS as well. So this is not all just a multiple choice assessment. You pick the questions you want by topic or by source exam. It's a little bit fuzzy, so I'll just skip through it. You actually click on the questions you want. You arrange them by drag and drop. You decide how you want them to look, and you can make overheads and flashcards and non-test-like documents. You hit the preview button, and you get a customized PDF file delivered right to your computer. So that's what our problematic site is all about, and please do check it out because you may find some really good uses for it, and it definitely ties in with the real-time form of assessment I was talking about earlier. Now, I'm just going to show you 3 more quick slides about what we're trying to do because I think they're important from a professional standpoint and not even commercial. This one we've more or less accomplished. We still have a little bit of tweaking to do to perfect it. But one of the things we really set out to do was to make sure that questions would fit on different layouts, particularly small screens that are coming out. So one of the things that people just take for granted on the Problematic website is that you can choose the questions that you want and they're going to fit. So if you want to make flashcards for students to do warm-ups or games, the questions are automatically scaled to fit, and I think that's a huge step forward as we start delivering them to small screens, tablets and phones. I think the importance of that scaling will be even clearer. Something else we're working on, I think we're half successful right now, is filtering and converting questions. We built in an option so that multiple choice answers could be hidden, so that questions that work as free response and choices could be hidden, could be used in non-assessment kinds of ways, homework, warm-ups, whatever kinds of activities in a classroom where you don't want it to be selected response or multiple choice. So we actually have a little filter button, and we flagged questions that can be converted. And one of the options in the program is to check this little box. Hopefully you can read it. This says hide choices, and it actually turns a question into free response. And off to the right, you can see a filter option that we're working on. Again, we've made great strides. We now have all the questions flagged as to whether or not they can be turned into free response, which kind of allows them to do double duty. The next type of flagging we're going to do is to make them useful on different devices by actually putting in criteria about, do they have a numeric answer? And so that you could filter out only those questions where the devices can handle a numeric answer. Or are they an alphanumeric answer, where you have to be able to handle text and numbers? And then extending on beyond that into math formatting, small diagrams, things like that. We're going to try to tag our questions over time so that with different filters, the questions can be pulled out to work with different kinds of scoring and device capabilities. And then lastly, here's something that we're also still working on. This is very hard to perfect, which is the handling of free response answers from devices. Right now we have a little override feature where if a student does enter a longer example, as you see here, a teacher can go in and and the software can't handle it. It's more than the software can interpret to know whether it's right or wrong. We do interpret numeric and alphanumeric kinds of answers, but anything more than that, we just leave it as unscored, and the teacher can go in and manually mark it as correct or incorrect using the little dialog box option you see to the right. So again, I'm presenting these things really in a twofold manner to show where we've come, but also to kind of illustrate these are real challenges. It's definitely where the world is going with real-time formative assessment, and it's a tough problem to be able to address these things like free response and trying to convert questions into different types of uses. Finally, I'll just wrap up with just a few ideas which I'll pick up in the next webinar. The next webinar won't be so focused on questions, but it'll be much more focused on real innovative ways of using these in the classroom from beginning to the end, warm-ups right through exit tickets and exit slips, problem of the day type of activities. And then what I personally find really interesting is peer-to-peer learning, small groups and pairs of students, which I think is really a model for the future in classrooms, especially as blended learning takes over a little bit more with videos and self-guided learning. I think that's really exciting, and I'll talk about that in my next webinar. Well, I jumped the gun a tiny bit again because there's the advertisement for the next webinar. It's officially called Closing the Circle, Exploring New Classroom Models. And my goal is to kind of pull together what I've covered in the first two and kind of put it back in a real-life situation of tying it in with the realities of the classroom, the fact that a bell rings after 50 minutes or 55 minutes, so how can we tie all these ideas into what really goes on in a real teacher's experience. So I hope you'll participate. I hope you got some good ideas from today's webinar, and I really appreciate you spending part of your day with me. So I'm going to stop talking at that point and give you an opportunity to ask a few questions. I'm not handling the chat, so I don't know if somebody from EdWeb wants to put up any questions up on screen that seem to be common. And have a great evening, everybody. Don't forget your CE certificate will be sent to you automatically. So anybody want to pose a chat question? Okay, here's one. Well, that's a great question. I wish I had another few hours or days. I'll try. I'm going to hedge a little bit just because I don't have a lot of time. Personally, I'm a proponent in there being a very faint line between assessment and instruction. I think that when teachers walk around the classroom and they're helping students, really good teachers have a knack for assessing at the same time and figuring out where the students are. I think the best teachers always know when to call out a student in the classroom and simply pose a question. Now, whether that's instruction or assessment, it's really hard to tell. I'm not sure technology changes any of that all very much. I think technology will help probably mostly save time, give teachers quicker responses, maybe take over a little bit of the management that goes with asking questions to a large group. But in the end, personally, I'm a believer in the teacher's role. And as I said at the beginning, that doesn't mean standing in front of the classroom in the old professorial model, but just being a coach and a mentor and helping, a little bit of Socratic method, helping draw out the answers from students and helping them become self-learners and enjoy learning. And whether technology has much of a role there, I'm still not sure. But it'll definitely help with a lot of the task-oriented stuff that every teacher faces. Yeah, this is a good question, probably directed toward personalization and differentiation. Right now, the world is kind of splitting in a little bit of a way, and I think it'll probably come back together and split again and follow some kind of sinuous path. Right now, most of the differentiation is kind of taking two forms. It's teachers setting up a series of activities for students It's very time consuming to set up these series, and then having students work on them individually with some kind of quick little assessments marking progress, and the student moves on, and that might be individually, even in small groups, maybe with some peer-to-peer learning. And then the other model that's splitting off is putting students in front of computers and having it computer guided. There's pros and cons to both, but I think those are probably the two prevailing models right now in large classes, and maybe there's even a hybrid where classes are getting large, 30, 35 kids. I mean, whoever submitted this question wrote 25 plus. I think probably a lot of people watching this webinar are thinking, boy, I wish I had 25 plus kids. I've got 35 or 40. And I think it's even getting worse in some schools. I think in those situations, a hybrid approach may even be occurring in many places where a computer might have a classroom might have 20 computers off to the side, and those are being used by students doing some computer-guided stuff, while the other 15, 20, 25 students are in small groups or maybe working with the teacher. I think that's a pretty good model, and that's probably the best I can say with the time I have. I'll try to cover some of that in the next webinar. Problematic question about grade. Right now it's 3 to 12. We're adding grades 1 and 2 Common Core Math in just a couple of weeks, and we may go as low as kindergarten. Okay, so that's probably the answer to that question. Somebody's about to put up another one. I'm a little hesitant to recommend apps. Nearpod is very popular, and I'm only saying this because there's so much out there to learn, and I've got my own discipline, so I can't really stay on top of that. But I know Nearpod is pretty popular. There's little scoring apps like Infuse Learning and Socrative that are pretty popular. I think that's probably a great question, maybe just to post on our Assessment for Learning a community site, and maybe some other people will jump in and give answers to that. But I'm afraid when it comes down to recommending apps, I have to admit that's a little bit out of my realm. So I apologize for that.